CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Jumia Technologies, one of the largest e-commerce companies in Africa, has listed on the New York Stock Exchange. In so doing, it has become the first African technology startup to list on a major global exchange. This listing on the New York Stock Exchange has now propelled Africa's online trading to a new high, signaling a new dawn for e-commerce in Africa. But with major strides yet to be made in internet infrastructure, coupled with diverse and rapidly changing domestic markets, what is the actual status of e-commerce in Africa? And what challenges lie ahead for Africa's online trade? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Well, Jumia's listing at the New York Stock Exchange has drawn renewed attention to the emergence of new development opportunities in Africa. But what does the online retailer's initial public offering mean for the continent's e-commerce sector? Uche Okoronkwo now takes a closer look at this development.
It was a watershed moment for Africa's tech ecosystems as Jumia, often tagged as Africa's Amazon, became the first major African-focused venture-funded tech company to go public. Analysts predicted there would be a good amount of interest, and they were right. After raising over $196 million with the sale of about 13.5 million American depository receipts at about $14.50 each, its shares soared 75.59%, trading as high as $27 per share earlier on Monday.
I need a great deal.
For many retail investors, this listing is an opportunity to buy the African growth story. While this new listing does put Jumia in uncharted territory, many in Africa's e-commerce sector still question Jumia's African story. And that has resulted in the now popular Twitter hashtag, Jumia is not African. Jumia does have more than 4 million customers in about 14 African countries. But the company is registered in Germany, its headquarters are in Dubai, and its technical development is based in Portugal. The firm is also operating in a sector that is still very much in its infancy in Africa, and that shows in its bottom line. Though Jumia sales jumped by almost 40% last year, the firm is still not profitable. It warned investors that it has accumulated losses of almost $1 billion since its inception, and it relies on external financing. In markets like Nigeria, consumer-focused online retail players like Konga and Dealday are struggling to remain above water, or they have completely collapsed. But though Jumia's listing does reveal little about the fundamentals of investing in African e-commerce, the consensus seems to be that it cannot be ignored as a flagship for the sector. Online commerce will play a vital role in driving a new type of African development based around technology and innovation. And after all is said and done, perhaps most important is that Jumia has now gotten people to talk more about African tech. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Africa.
And to help us analyze the status of e-commerce in Africa and the significance of Jumia's listing in the New York Stock Exchange, I'm now joined by my expert panel of guests. Olatunde Balogun, he's joining me from Lagos. He's the CEO of Rent Small, an online rental agency in Nigeria. In Beijing is Liu Chungchen, a professor at the Central University of Finance and Economics. Ron Kamwara is in Kampala. He's the CEO of Jumia Uganda. And with me in studio is David Owiro. He's an independent consultant economist. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us in this conversation. Ron Kamwara, I'll start off with you as the CEO of Jumia Kampala. It's been quite a few weeks there for Jumia listing at the New York Stock Exchange, the first African startup to do so. Many are saying, though, that this is ushering in a new dawn for African startups. For Jumia and for you, though, what does this mean? What is the significance of your listing and the significance of this for African startups?
Well, indeed, it's a big milestone for Jumia and a big milestone for all tech startups in Africa. One, obviously, the New York Stock Exchange is a premier market in the world, and we're delighted to be able to IPO there. It's been many years of hard work, of creating value for our customers, showing impact for our sellers who have been able to make big revenues through Jumia. We've shown impact to our investors, and for now to reach the IPO level, I think is a significant milestone for all who are involved. We're very grateful and humbled as Jumia for this moment because our teams, our partners, our logistics providers have done an incredible job to get us to this moment. And most importantly, I think the African consumer who has trusted e-commerce and gone online to shop, to buy, to sell. And I think overall it's a coming of age of the African e-commerce and African tech. Our ambition here with this IPO is to increase our adoption rate. Whereas we're growing and growing very fast in all our markets, we're still small.
I want to get to Olatunde's view here because you've said it's a monumental moment for African tech startups. Olatunde, do you share that view?
Yes, I do actually. It's an exciting moment, especially for the fact that Jumia was started in Nigeria. And I mean, it's really big milestone, and the impact it's going to be tremendous going forward for Africa and even for Nigeria. For startup in Nigeria, young people that are trying to build something like myself, it's a moment for us to really believe that there's so much to be done and there's so much to be achieved. And Jumia, being a unicorn in Africa, the first company with 1 billion valuation, and then first tech company to be listed on a premier stock exchange market. Right. It's really, really, really good, and we are really excited about it.
David, what are your thoughts, though, because African tech startups the last 18 months has been quite tumultuous for them, though it hasn't really been smooth sailing. Jumia itself hasn't been exactly that profitable.
Yes, certainly there's some leading, of course, that startups have to go through. What is expected, most of the shock perhaps coming from the economic performance of Africa in general. But the long-term outlook is actually one that is quite positive. If we look at the growing consumption patterns on the continent, we see indeed a change of consumption patterns. People not only seeking online marketplaces, that are more convenient and that can deliver and offer logistical solutions that are able to meet the expectations, are certainly in demand. Secondly, also, if you look at our the demographic structure in Africa is changing. We have 2/3 of young people under 25, comprising within the African continent. And we know, as with a lot of young people, they have embraced the internet age and basically spending much of their time online and even doing most of their shopping online. But
the internet penetration, though, does vary from country to country. Some of the top big ones, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. Kenyan penetration is at about 86.1% here. I mean, when you look at it across the continent, though, how does it look in terms of e-commerce for you?
One positive thing is that the middle class is actually growing. And for the middle class, these are people who are basically spending between $2 and $20 a day. And if you consider that, most of middle class people have smartphones. And therefore, this augurs very well for e-commerce platforms that are able to connect marketplaces and connect with these people with these smartphones. And so given that large growth within that middle class, it certainly portends well for the future of the growth of e-commerce. At the same time, if you look at the payment solutions that are being innovated in Africa, And the many more emerging marketplaces online marketplaces that are competing with each other, not only Jumia, but you have OLX, and you have all these other platforms that are emerging every other day. That competition certainly is good for growth, even though Jumia right now is not seeing profits, but certainly there is some long-term positivity within that growth. And so for me, I retain a very optimistic view of the e-commerce sector.
Professor Liu, are there comparisons, though, because African startups are now going global, given Jumia's situation here? Are there comparisons or parallels that can be drawn between e-commerce platforms in Africa, such as Jumia, and e-commerce platforms in China, such as Alibaba, for instance, which is a massive organization here?
Yes. I think, Alibaba's business model, they are very clear. The Jack Ma's business logic is very clear. First, he established the Taobao. It's an internet giant for online shopping. When they started the business in Taobao, they just paid service for prepaid and all cash on delivery. Then it found okay, this is not good enough, so it's got 支付宝, what we call it, Alipay. It's online payment. This is very good to solve the problem of asymmetry of between the buyer and the seller, because it's kind of like a letter of credit in online. And then with Alipay, it established a financial giant kingdom called Ant Financial Group. It provides comprehensive financial services, including the personal credit records. So it's provided a lot of services like you can order food online, you can book the hotel, book the ticket, order the taxi online. So it's provide a lot of services online with Ant Financial Group. Then it created the Tmall. Then it created an artificial shopping festival called Double 11. You know that this is pretty huge in China because millions of people, billions of people, purchase products online on every November 11th.
Right.
So yes, this is a pretty very good business model for Africa companies, Jumia, to learn from Alibaba. Yes.
Ron Kamwara, there are those who are asking, though, that why the New York Stock Exchange? Why not the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the Johannesburg Securities Exchange? Why the New York Stock Exchange, though? I mean, do you not have do you not have the leverage, or do African stock markets not have the power, though, to create investment for you?
No, we do believe in African markets, and indeed we did look at all options. But the reason that we selected the New York Stock Exchange is because, one, obviously it's the most premier, most dynamic stock exchange in the world. But most importantly, it does understand our business model more than any other market. Many companies like ours have IPO'd the New York Stock Exchange. And so investors in New York, and this is a global market. So we're not just looking at investors in New York, but we have to agree that investors at the New York Stock Exchange are more familiar with the Jumia way of business than many other markets that we considered. But obviously, all our business is in Africa. We are a big part of African economies. We employ thousands of people across the continent, and we're very delighted to be from Africa, but attracting investment across the globe. And for me, the significance of this is that for the first time, we have global investors at the premier stock exchange looking at Africa as a place where technology can create value, create impact for customers and sellers, and make money for investors. This is a remarkable milestone because if I'm a startup now in Africa, Jumia has proven that investors have confidence in the model, investors have confidence in Africa. So outside of being much more experienced with our business model. I think it's a great milestone. It's a big ceiling we've been able to crash, and my hope is that many other startups from Africa are able to go globally and attract international investment while operating and expanding and doing business in Africa.
Gentlemen, we'll take a short break on the program, but do stay tuned. When we come back, we'll delve into the challenges of e-commerce in Africa. Stay tuned.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Gentlemen, I'll begin the second part of the conversation with a quote from Dr. Mohisa Kitui, who is the Secretary General of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. He said, and I quote, "Here in Africa, when ordering online, one has to pick, pay, and then pray." Ron Kamwara, I'll start off with you. Your thoughts on that, and how do you address that concern?
Well, it's a concern indeed, and the best way to address that, and what we've done in our markets, is to allow customers to pay on delivery. So customers are able to order, receive a product, look at it, and then pay on delivery. And we know that one of the main reasons that people choose to do cash on delivery is because they don't trust what they will receive at the end. On Jumia, the biggest thing we've done is we do verify all our sellers, we do verify all our partners, we guarantee with return 7-day returns. We have warranty on many of our products, and we know that we're dealing in a very difficult market whereby trust overall is at its lowest, and we need to make sure that customers have protections like free refund in 7 days. We need to be able to allow them to accept cash on delivery. We need to make sure that all our products are vetted, that we do hold our sellers accountable to make sure that online shopping is as safe as possible. When we're dealing with a very small section of customers, because e-commerce is at its infancy, we're still growing, we need to make sure that every transaction done is secure, is safe, that customers are protected. And I have to say that in our markets, trading online is much safer because the offline world doesn't have those protections. And so I think that more and more customers are realizing this, and the fear is subsiding. And if you look at the trajectory of Jumia, it tells you that and the reorder rate and return rate is people are happy and comfortable. But I agree with you, the fear is there. People are worried about whether they will get what they order for, whether it's safe, whether it's legitimate or genuine. And if you are to work in Africa, you have to solve all those issues. So payment issues, you have to solve the product quality issues, you have to experience issues. And I think that why we've been successful in our market is that we've been able to solve all those three.
David, do you find that there is a difference operating e-commerce platforms in Africa as compared to operating e-platforms in places like China or European countries?
Certainly, of course, the biggest being the cultural differences. Typically, Africans tend to be distrusting, whether it is because of culture or whether it is because of the experiences one might not know. And so a lot of work for mainly e-commerce platforms has to go around ensuring that their service can actually be trustworthy. And so these additions in terms of verifications and ensuring that sellers actually do sell what they say they sell and whether the product will be of the quality that the consumer expects, those are things that have to be addressed at the onset. I think this becomes more of a challenge in the African context when you're moving across borders, because more often than not, the price that you see online is not the price that you ultimately pay for, particularly when it comes to cross-border trade. So taxes and in terms of customs and import duties on most of these products are often unknown, and so that being a factor, it sort of hinders international cross-border trade in Africa, because you cannot from the outset say the level of taxes you're going to pay for particular products.
Olatunde Balogun, even though your organization is mainly, your enterprise is mainly in Nigeria or Nigeria-based, what are some of the challenges you've met during your start-out period?
Okay, thanks. I think one of our biggest challenge right now is basically the supply side. Convincing landlord that this is the solution, this is the way forward. Why the demand is high, the supply side of it is still quite challenging. But we understand that if we are trying to solve a problem, then the persistence, the patience is all that is needed. I'm sure Jumia, they've been around for 7 years. They've also been persistent, just as Alibaba and Amazon. All these companies, they've been around for years, and they went through this persistence. So we know that as long as the demand is there, and consumers, tenants in this case, they are excited about our solution. We know that it's just a matter of time that we'll be able to solve this on a bigger scale. We're solving it. We're getting more landlords on a daily basis, property owners, but we still need to do more. And we can through innovative solution, becoming very innovative. The CEO of Jumia Uganda was just talking about the different solution they've created in terms of even payment, what people can pay on delivery, cash on delivery. So we just need to be creative and innovative, and that is what we are doing with some of the challenges. Distrust is very big, even with our own with our own products. Landlords, one of the question they will tell us, or what they will throw at us, is that how can I trust that a tenant that is paying monthly, we can pay for the entire duration of the contract, which usually in most cases is 12 months. And we tell them, as we do proper vetting, verification, but at the same time, with innovation, we've introduced rent insurance, which protects the landlord. With innovation also, we have standing order in place, which means that when our tenants, they receive payment, salary, or whichever form of income in their bank accounts, we can automatically take it as at when due. So innovation is really the key to solving the challenges that any tech company can face in the market or in the industry they are trying to play in. And that's been it for us.
Professor Liu, innovation has become key for African startups here. Listening to the challenges that Jumia and the pay system in Nigeria are talking about, do you think the opportunity that is being afforded by Africa's population now in 1.2 billion, do you think that is outweighing the challenges that e-commerce platforms are facing in Africa?
Yes, I think the infrastructure is in Africa is not good enough compared to China. We have a massive construction of railways, airlines, ports, and highway roads. It's all helped the development of e-commerce. The second, I think, is that the logistics. It's pretty important because you have to deliver the products from one side to another, from the business people to the consumers, and it takes time, takes money, and need a lot of investment, and a lot of talented people to design and manage the system, and a lot of delivery people, to participate in the process. So this is a very important one. The third one is I think the political stability is also a challenge for Africa to develop, e-commerce or any other business, because there are from time to time there are political issues or conflicts, worsen the business environment, and it's not very good for the investors or business people's confidence, and then because Africa's e-commerce, most of them start from the international trade, so trade facilities are also very important. How to cut down the tariff, how to make it convenient to cross-border e-commerce is very important for Africa e-commerce companies.
Right.
And then I think that all this not only need efforts from the companies, but also from the efforts from the countries. Most of these challenges could only be solved by the economic development and improvement of business environment.
Right, so gentlemen, I'm going to end this program on a note that I started. It has been a milestone for Jumia and African startups. So looking ahead though, Ron Kamwara, starting off with you, what is the future of e-commerce from where you're sitting?
Well, the future of e-commerce is great. I think with this IPO, I expect that we as Jumia will continue to do the same thing. That is, simplify people's lives by giving them the best prices and more options to buy and sell. We are confident that it's going to be a big boost also for the local tech scene in all our countries, that we expect that more investors will come in, that more entrepreneurs will have the opportunity to grow their businesses like Jumia has. And so the future of e-commerce is fantastic. There has never been a better time to be in e-commerce in Africa. This is the best time for tech in Africa. And then for Jumia, we will continue doing the same things we've always done, is that give the best experience to our customers, make value for our investors, serve our customers, and be a huge part of our economies. And my expectation is that we'll continue to do that.
Olatunde Balogun, this is the best time to be in tech in Africa. Do you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I think we're going to see is more of tech startups like Jumia that are going to go global, that are going to be listed on premier stock markets around the world, and rent small. We are in it. We are excited about what we are doing, and we're also leading our space.
David Owiro, your thoughts. What is the future of e-commerce on the continent?
There's certainly going to be a lot more growth, at least in the long term. Growth driven mainly by increasing disposable incomes, as well as the demographic composition of Africa. We will see actually a demographic dividend, and with increase in incomes, definitely there will be more participation in e-commerce platforms as the consumer becomes more discerning in terms of the convenience premium that they're able to get from these platforms.
Professor Liu, you have the final word on the program.
I think there is a great future for the Africa's e-commerce development, because the economic development in Africa is still going on, and there is a great population and the market potential in Africa, and I think there is a bright future for e-commerce in Africa. Jumia is just a very good start, and it provides a solid proof for the whole world that in Africa there could also be internet giants like Jumia, like any other e-commerce platforms. So I'm very confident that in the future there will be more internet giants in Africa. Yeah.
Gentlemen, we leave it there for the moment. That's all we have time for this week. But thank you to my guests for their insights. Olatunde Balogun in Lagos. He's the CEO of Rent Small, an online rental agency in Nigeria. In Beijing, Professor Liu Chungsheng from the Central University of Finance and Economics. Ron Kamwara in Kampala, the CEO of Jumia Uganda. And with me in studio, David Owiro, an independent consultant economist. Remember, we'd love to hear your feedback through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch this and more episodes of Talk Africa on our YouTube playlist and the CGTN Africa website. We'll keep the conversation going and tune in again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall. It's goodbye.